For Nancy Moore, this morning began as usual, with a cup of coffee and a sweet cinnamon bun. The tart, invigorating drink, having driven away the remnants of sleep, set up the girl's body in a pleasant way. "I've been sitting up too long. I'm gonna be late for work," Nancy thought anxiously, and casting a reproachful glance at the hands of the clock, began to get ready. After twirling around in the mirror for a couple of minutes, she threw on her jacket and went to the nearest bus stop. During the years spent in Chicago, the girl has changed a lot, and got used to the frenzied pace of the metropolis. Now she was no longer afraid of the car's noise and the neon glare of shop windows. Time flew by very quickly on the way to work. Listening to pleasant music in headphones, Nancy looked with interest at passers-by scurrying back and forth and busy with their everyday affairs. Here is her place of work, located on the corner of Main Street. This cafe attracted Nancy at first sight, when the girl in search of work came across an advertisement for the admission of employees. The administrator immediately liked the purposeful girl, and after a short interview, Nancy took the vacant place, vacated after her predecessor was fired for absenteeism. For her, it was a great success. After all, Nancy really needed money, because one of the provincial farms of Iowa, the girl had an elderly father and a disabled sister. With great difficulty, Nancy's family collected her money for the road, and she went to conquer the impregnable city. The work, to the great surprise of the girl, pleased her, and the time at the counter flew by unnoticed. The girl knew the preferences of all regular customers, and fulfilled their orders quickly and efficiently. Nancy was an excellent judge of people, and they never offended her with tips. The influx of visitors today exceeded all expectations, and by the evening the young waitresses were literally falling off their feet from fatigue. Nancy kept glancing at her watch, impatiently waiting for the end of the shift. But her dreams of leaving soon were dispelled by one very strange event. "Nancy, a young man on the street is feeling bad, I believe." The chef turned to the girl. The waitress, throwing a jacket over her shoulders, went outside. Looking around, she noticed someone's hunched figure around the corner of the establishment. In his hand, a recent client clutched an unfinished bottle of whiskey and apparently intended to finish it. "Hey man, how are you? Is everything alright?" Nancy asked, confused. The young man muttered something unintelligible, and raising his head looked at her, with a look full of pain and despair. "Yeah, you definitely need help," Nancy said in a low voice, and walked briskly to the cafe. After a quick conversation with the receptionist, she put her apron aside and changed her clothes and went outside. To Nancy's surprise, the stranger was exactly where she left him, and didn't budge an inch. The guy stared blankly at one point, and moaned faintly. Nancy resolutely approached the stranger, and taking the rest of the whiskey from him, poured it on the ground. In response to this, the guy grumbled with displeasure, but the young waitress was not at all confused. Then she abruptly shook the guy and looked into his eyes. Finally, a spark of intelligence flashed in the stranger's eyes. "Who are you, and why did you take the bottle away from me?" the guy asked in bewilderment. Nancy thought for a second, and then, gathering her courage, said, "I want to help you. You'll ruin yourself after all what happened to you, that you're ready to drown your grief in alcohol." In response to this, the guy told her that his name is Martinez, and also, quite recently, his fiancée left him meanly. The fact was that the abstinent beauty did not want to have anything to do with a loser whose company was ruined by scammers. After listening to the guy, Nancy, after a short pause, said, "I understand, of course, but life does not end there, and you need to believe in a bright future." The guy nodded indifferently, avoiding looking the waiters in the eye. Realizing that the guy needed help, Nancy invited him home to give him something hot to drink. The time was already late, and it was not comfortable to be on the street. On the way to the house, the young people chatted about everything in the world, and felt as if they'd known each other for many years. Hot tea and the cozy atmosphere of the Nancy's kitchen finally brought the guy to his senses. Time flew by unnoticed, and casting a reproachful glance at the clock, Liam got ready to go home. At this moment, Nancy wanted the guest to stay, but on the other hand, she knew perfectly well that she should not rush to conclusions. So they parted, thinking about each other. All the next day, Nancy couldn't get Liam out of her head. Having worked the shift with a great difficulty, the girl went outside and froze in amazement. In front of her stood a young man, fragrant with cologne, on whose face a joyful smile froze. "Liam, is that you?" Nancy whispered in surprise. In response to this, the guy smiled charmingly and handed her a huge bouquet of white roses. Needless to say, this evening went just fine. Communicating with each other, the young people with distinct clarity felt a growing mutual sympathy. "You know, I feel very good around you, Liam," Nancy said, blushing with embarrassment. The guy smiled sweetly and looked away, thinking about his own. Of course, he really liked Nancy, but on the other hand, he understood perfectly well that for a comfortable living together he needed to find a normal job. Tormented by doubts, he literally could not calm down. Fortunately, help came from where it was not expected at all. The fact was that Nancy had long matured the idea to establish a business on the internet, but taking into account work in a cafe, she did not have time for it. For their own purposes, young people took a loan from the bank and risked everything for the sake of believing in a dream. The perseverance and determination of the lovers soon gave its result. Less than 3 months later, the business began to bring albeit small but stable income. And when Nancy felt financially independent, she quit the cafe and plunged into the abyss of market relations. At the same time, the girl has never seen Liam's mother, who remained a widow after the death of her husband in a car accident. Unfortunately, the girl did not know that at the same time, Mrs. Martinez scolded her for nothing. "Who the hell is she? Where did you find this beggar girl? I'm ashamed of you, son. Your late father will definitely not approve of this." Mrs. Martinez was indignant. To his mother's great chagrin, Liam was in no hurry to listen to her advice and enjoyed life next to Nancy. Meanwhile, the affairs of the young people were going just fine. Having saved up money, they decided to buy a house in an elite area of the city. Without a doubt, this purchase brought the lovers even closer together, who were already actively planning a wedding. The wedding ceremony was held at the highest level and earned a lot of positive feedback from friends of the Martinez family. And only Mrs. Martinez, from the very beginning of their relationship, was against their marriage. "It's okay, time will pass, and Liam's mom will be able to get used to me," Nancy naively thought. As time went on, Mrs. Martinez hated her son's fiancé more and more, and even the news of Nancy's pregnancy did not change her attitude. Sadly, throughout the entire period, the girl was tormented by terrible toxicosis and dizziness, but the birth surprisingly passed without complications. The birth of 2 blue-eyed twins, Kevin and Jacob, brought the couple closer than ever, but Mrs. Martinez did not give her son a pass, convincing him that the children did not look like him at all. "Look at them! Their eyes are all blue, and their hair is light, but you're brown-haired, and we've never had twins in our family," she told her son. In response to this, Liam only waved away, trying not to pay attention to the disturbing suspicions in his heart. Eventually, tired of his mother's nagging, Liam approached Nancy and taken her by the shoulders and said that in the very near future he wanted to take a paternity test. "What are you thinking of? I won't take it anything. These are your children, and all the doubts are caused by your mother's conjectures," Nancy replied irritably. This answer stunned Liam so much that he, that same evening, got drunk to unconsciousness. At the same time, thoughts of infidelity and deception on the part of his wife still revolved in his inflamed brain. At some point in a fit of anger, Liam took the keys to his brand new Chevrolet and went to the store for another bottle of whiskey. At the turn of the highway, he lost control and flew into a ditch at high speed. The heat literally folded the car in half. Rescuers still managed to extract the victim's body from the mangled cabin. Unfortunately, Liam didn't make it to the hospital and died 10 minutes after the accident. Needless to say how many tears poor Nancy had to shed. The woman could not understand how, in an instant, her beautiful world collapsed into an abyss of pain and longing. At the cemetery, Mrs. Martinez publicly accused her daughter-in-law of treason and the death of her son. In response to this, Nancy only dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief and sobbed softly. She didn't want to prove anything to a woman who decided to accuse her of all mortal sins. Imperceptibly, 10 years flew by, similar to each other like twin brothers. Nancy, gradually recovering from the loss of her husband, was able to save their family business. Things went up again, and the young mother worked tirelessly to ensure that her children did not need anything. One day, a strange car stopped at Nancy's house. Leaning on the cane, a hunched old woman came out of it, who looked at the two-story mansion without obvious condemnation. Then, squinting blindly, she went to the door and pressed the bell button. Soon, shuffling footsteps obeyed, and then Nancy appeared on the threshold, dressed in a housecoat. When she saw Mrs. Martinez, she pursed her lips resentfully and looked expressively into her eyes, waiting for an explanation. "Nancy, honey, I'm already very old. I have no relatives and therefore I would like to stay with you for a while." The old woman began with an embarrassed cough. In response to this, Nancy silently entered the house and returned a couple of minutes later, holding in her hands a sheet covered with stamped seals. "Here, please read it," Nancy said dryly and handed the old lady an official document. As it turned out later, it was a confirmed DNA test that Kevin and Jacob, with a 99.9% probability, were the sons of the late Liam Martinez. Only now Mrs. Martinez realized what a mistake she had made by accusing her daughter-in-law of infidelity. Perhaps the old lady simply had a belated epiphany, or perhaps she was just afraid to be left alone. But anyway, Nancy did not refuse the quarrelsome mother-in-law help and provided her with shelter. Every day, thanking her daughter-in-law for her hospitality, Mrs. Martinez prayed to God for forgiveness every day and did everything to make amends to Nancy. Only now she realized the price of a real family relationship and kindred mutual assistance, which she had dreamed of all these many years.